There's a moment in life where silence becomes louder than words. A moment when you look around and realize you've been pouring your energy into proving, pleasing, chasing, reacting, and explaining, only to feel more empty than fulfilled. Let me ask you something deeply personal. When was the last time you sat with yourself in full silence? Not to escape the world, but to listen to the part of you that doesn't scream for attention. Every single morning, your body wakes up with a limited reserve of energy. This energy isn't just the kind you use to walk, talk, or work out. It's the deeper kind, the emotional bandwidth, the cognitive stamina, the spiritual fire that fuels your decisions, your focus, your resilience. And just like a bank account, it's not infinite. Yet we live in a world where people spend that precious resource like it's limitless, not on growth, not on healing, not on becoming who they were born to be, but on proving they matter, proving they're not what someone said they were, proving they've changed, proving they can be accepted, applauded, liked. It happens on the most subtle levels. You post something, not because it's aligned with your values, but because you want them to see you succeeding. You say yes to something you should have said no to just to avoid looking weak. You explain your choices to people who wouldn't get it even if you drew them a map. It's exhausting, and what's worse, it keeps you locked in a feedback loop where your value is never intrinsic. It's constantly negotiated. Every reaction you give to criticism is a deposit into someone else's emotional account and a withdrawal from yours. Every time you try to justify your life to someone who doesn't walk in your shoes, you're bleeding energy that was meant to build your future. Let's ground this in neuroscience. When your brain is under constant pressure to monitor how others perceive you, when you're thinking, did I say the right thing? Did they like me? Did they approve? You're activating what's called the default mode network. It's a system in the brain that becomes active when your mind is wandering, especially into thoughts about yourself and others' opinions. Now, here's the problem. The more time you spend in that space, the more anxious, insecure, and mentally fatigued you become. It's like trying to sprint with ankle weights on. You may think you're moving forward, but you're burning out fast and getting nowhere meaningful. You see, proving is reactive. It means your identity is tethered to external judgment. But when you focus on becoming instead, when you direct your energy inward to heal, to refine, to train, to learn, to be, you go from being dependent on applause to being rooted in truth. The real ones? The ones who build empires in silence. They don't waste time reacting to every comment, every doubt, every shadow. They know their worth isn't up for debate. They know clarity comes not from explaining, but from embodying. There's a shift that happens the moment you stop broadcasting your worth and start investing it. Suddenly, your energy isn't leaking, it's compounding. You're not drained by drama, you're fueled by direction. You start choosing solitude over approval, focus over noise, peace over performance. And here's what's wild, the moment you stop proving yourself, people start noticing you more. Not because you're loud, not because you're flashy, but because your energy becomes magnetic. Still, unshakable, it speaks before you do. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, to prove yourself, to post for the wrong reasons, pause. Ask yourself, is this aligned with who I am, or am I spending my currency just to be seen? Because your energy is your wealth, and real wealth doesn't scream. It builds, it multiplies, and it speaks for itself. There's a reason silence unnerves people. Because in a world where noise is mistaken for truth and shouting is mistaken for strength, a calm, grounded presence feels like resistance. And it is. Most of us were raised in environments, at home, in schools, in culture, where silence was either punished or pathologized. Why aren't you saying something? Speak up for yourself? Don't just sit there, do something. We were taught that not responding equates to weakness. That if we don't clap back, retaliate, or explain ourselves, we're somehow lesser. That silence means surrender. But the truth, the real, mature, deeply evolved truth is this: silence is not the absence of power. It is the application of it. Because silence, true, conscious, intentional silence, is not about cowardice. It's not about running away or avoiding. It's about holding your ground without needing to stomp it. It's about choosing not to let chaos drag you into its current. When someone disrespects you, tries to provoke you, doubts your path, and your first instinct is to defend, but you choose stillness instead, that is emotional mastery. That is the apex of discipline. Not because you can't respond, but because you could, and yet you choose not to. You've probably seen this before. The greatest leaders, the calmest warriors, the most centered individuals, they don't jump at every insult. They don't swing wildly in response to every slight. They understand that not every battle is worth fighting and not every opinion is worth addressing. They are not threatened by noise because they're anchored in truth. And neuroscience backs this up. Emotional regulation, the ability to feel a wave of anger, fear, or shame and not act on it impulsively, is one of the highest executive functions in the human brain. It engages the prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision-making, logic, and long-term planning. Meanwhile, the reactive, emotionally charged part of the brain, the amygdala, wants to pull you into fight or flight. When someone says something that triggers you, it's the amygdala that screams, "Say something! Clap back! Don't let them get away with that!" But when you're trained, when you've done the inner work, when you know who you are, you pause, you regulate, you choose. That's not weakness. That's power with precision. And this self-possession doesn't just serve you in conflict, it serves your future. Because every time you refuse to react out of impulse, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating stronger neural pathways that say, I don't need to respond to be at peace. I don't need to be loud to be strong. I don't need to be heard to be powerful. That's not suppression. That's sovereignty. That's choosing who you are becoming over proving who you've been. The silence I'm talking about is not passive. It's active. It's alert. It's fully awake. It's saying to the world, I know myself so deeply that your noise cannot touch my core. That kind of stillness is magnetic. It disarms people. It earns respect, not by demanding it, but by embodying it. Let's be honest. Anyone can react. Anyone can yell. Anyone can argue. That takes no skill. But to remain composed, to walk away when you're tempted to tear someone down, to smile when you could have spit venom, that takes character forged in the fire of self-awareness. It takes a nervous system that has been trained to stay calm in the presence of chaos. And it takes a mindset that no longer seeks to control others, but seeks to master self. So don't let this world confuse your silence for fear. Your calm isn't your cage, it's your crown. You're not hiding your voice. You're preserving your power. You're not weak because you didn't react. You're wise because you didn't give away your energy. And the man or woman who can sit in silence while their soul is burning, while their ego is screaming, while the world is watching, and still not move from that place of inner peace, that person is not soft. That person is forged. Because true strength isn't how loud you are. It's how deeply you can stay rooted when everything around you is shaking. Let's pause for a moment and ask a question we rarely dare to answer truthfully. Who are you still trying to convince? Who in your life still holds that invisible thread around your throat, pulling at you, making you explain your choices, your path, your growth? And more importantly, why? We all do it, especially in the early stages of transformation. You start healing, evolving, elevating your standards, walking away from drama, protecting your energy, and suddenly people start noticing, but not always in a good way. They don't clap for your clarity, they question it. They poke at it. They mock it. They mock it. They try to guilt you back into smallness. You hear things like, you've changed. Don't forget where you came from. You're acting different. You think you're better than us now? And you try to explain yourself. At first, you do it gently. You talk about growth, purpose, alignment. You tell them you're trying to focus on your mental health, your goals, your future. But it falls on deaf ears, not because you're unclear, but because they never wanted to understand. They're not listening to learn. They're listening to maintain the version of you that made them comfortable. And here's where the pain hits hardest. You realize they don't miss you. They miss the version of you that didn't threaten them. The one who played small, laughed at things that weren't funny, showed up when you didn't want to, stayed silent when you had truth in your chest. They miss the version of you that tolerated what your healed self now rejects. And when you start choosing yourself over their comfort, they call it betrayal. But let me tell you something. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your healing. You do not have to justify your growth to those committed to misunderstanding you. You are not a PowerPoint presentation. You are not a trial to be defended. You are a living, evolving being, and you have the sacred right to outgrow environments, people, patterns, and identities. The hard truth, some people are not attached to you. They are attached to your wounds. Your pain made them feel needed. Your chaos gave them something to fix. Your emptiness gave them space to dominate. So the moment you start to fill your own cup to regulate your nervous system, to choose peace over drama, they panic. Because now they can't control you through confusion. And in those moments, silence becomes your shield. Not the kind of silence that hides or represses, but the kind that says, I am no longer interested in being understood by those who are invested in misunderstanding me. That kind of silence is revolutionary. It's you taking your power back. It's you realizing that your energy is better spent building your future than defending your past. I remember vividly when this lesson became real for me. A close friend kept asking why I wasn't around as much, why I didn't hang out like before, why I seemed serious all the time. I tried to explain. I shared how I was working on my vision, taking my mental clarity seriously, focusing on what matters. You know what I got in return? Lauder. Oh, come on, you're being dramatic. Or, don't forget who you are. And then it clicked. I wasn't being heard. I was being managed. They weren't asking to reconnect. They were asking to reattach themselves to a version of me I had buried with intention. So I stopped explaining, not out of resentment, but out of respect for myself, for my process, for my evolution. That's when the power shifted. That's when I realized your transformation will always offend the ones who never intended to grow. And that offense, it's not your burden, it's their mirror. Let your results speak louder than your defense. Let your consistency speak louder than your apologies. Let your peace speak louder than your past. And if they still don't understand, that's okay. You weren't building for their understanding, you were building for your becoming. The ones who are meant to walk with you will never need a PowerPoint. They'll feel your integrity, your silence, your evolution. And they'll meet you where you are, not drag you back to where you were. Everyone wants to be focused. Everyone wants clarity, productivity, flow. We romanticize it. The artist in a studio, the athlete in the gym, the visionary locked in a room planning a revolution. But what most people don't realize is that focus doesn't start with action. It starts with isolation. It starts with silence so deep that it rattles the parts of you that were addicted to distraction. And that's the part nobody wants to talk about, because before focus feels empowering, it feels lonely. Before it gives you direction, it strips you down. Before it gives you freedom, it demands discipline. The truth is, most people aren't really unfocused, they're overstimulated. Their brains are flooded with dopamine, not because of passion or purpose, but because of chaos. Scroll here, reply there, swipe this, respond to that. Notifications, algorithms, opinions, trends, comparison after comparison after comparison. The mind becomes a browser with 37 tabs open and none of them are loading fully, just spinning. And so you end your days feeling drained, not because you worked hard, but because you were constantly divided. That's the real enemy of focus fragmentation. Neuroscience has a name for this. It's called dopamine dysregulation, where your reward systems are hijacked by micro stimuli that feel urgent but are ultimately empty. You feel busy, but you're not actually progressing. Your brain gets used to this pattern and it starts to prioritize what stimulates you most, not what serves you best. That's where neuroplasticity turns against you. But the beautiful truth is this: you can reverse that. You can reclaim your mind. And the starting point is intentional isolation. I don't mean loneliness. I don't mean hiding. I mean stepping back from the noise on purpose, to recalibrate, to realign, to rewire. When you isolate for growth, something powerful happens. Your nervous system begins to slow down. Your thoughts stop racing. Your dopamine levels stabilize. The fog lifts. And in that stillness, your true priorities start to emerge. That's what neuroscientists refer to as neuroplastic prioritization. Your brain begins to reallocate its energy toward what matters most. Your decisions become sharper. Your actions become deliberate. Your time becomes sacred. Focus is no longer something you chase. It becomes who you are. And let me tell you something else. When you master this inner stillness, you become dangerous in the best way possible. Because most of the world is too distracted to be effective. But you're tuned in, not scattered, not stretched thin, dialed in. You stop chasing 100 things and start owning one. And from there, mastery. It doesn't mean you shut out the world forever, but it means you stop letting it dictate your pace. You create your own rhythm. You guard your mornings. You cut out mental clutter. You train your brain like a muscle, because it is a muscle. And yes, some people will misread your silence as arrogance. Some will think you've gone cold. Some will say you've changed. Let them, because what they don't understand is that you've simply outgrown the noise. You're not isolating because you're broken. You're isolating because you're building. You're focusing because you're about to do something that actually matters. And here's the ultimate paradox. Once you isolate and find your true focus, you no longer crave validation. You no longer seek applause. You no longer need to be seen because you've finally seen yourself. So yes, go quiet, go deep, tune out the circus. Because when you focus on yourself, not out of ego, But out of intention, you don't just grow. We live in a culture obsessed with holding on, with staying the same, with staying in touch, keeping old connections alive, replying out of guilt, showing up just to maintain appearances. We're fed the idea that if you outgrow people, you're disloyal, that if you change, you're arrogant, that if you evolve and disconnect from who you once were, you're abandoning something sacred. But what if I told you the opposite is true? What if real growth requires detachment? You see, there's a version of you that was built in survival. That version of you did what they had to do. Maybe they bent, shrank, pleased, explained, tolerated. Maybe they kept people around who drained them just to avoid confrontation. Maybe they didn't know how to say no without apologizing. That version of you may have been necessary at the time, but it's not who you are anymore. And here's what you need to understand with unwavering clarity. You are not obligated to grant anyone access to that old self just because they once knew it intimately. Just because someone remembers you as insecure doesn't mean you owe them that insecurity. Just because someone used to walk all over you doesn't mean you hand them a map again. Just because someone was comfortable with your brokenness doesn't mean you shatter yourself for their comfort now. We grow. And as we grow, we shed, not out of hate, not out of ego, out of alignment. Growth has a gravitational pull. It draws you forward, and that pull will often require you to let go of old dynamics, outdated expectations, and people who only loved the unhealed version of you. And here's the thing about healing, it makes you unrecognizable to those who were only attached to your wounds. When you begin setting boundaries, when you begin choosing peace over pleasing, when you begin operating from self-respect instead of self-sacrifice, it shocks people, it triggers them, and it reveals their true intentions. You'll be called distant. You've changed. You're cold now. You're not fun anymore. You don't come around like you used to. But let me tell you something that will free you. They're not talking to you. They're talking to the version of you that no longer exists. They're speaking to a ghost. And you don't need to resurrect it to make them feel better. Your silence here becomes a boundary, a line drawn not with anger, but with clarity. It says, I'm not accessible to who I used to be. And I'm no longer keeping the doors open to versions of myself I had to heal from. And no, you don't have to make a grand announcement about your growth. You don't need to explain your healing. You don't have to convince anyone that you're better now. Just live it. Live the evolution. Let your consistency speak louder than your history. Let your presence, or your absence, teach the lesson without words. And most importantly, release the guilt. Guilt will try to chain you to a version of you that suffered so others could thrive. Let it go. You are not a memory. You are not their comfort zone. You are not a souvenir of your past. You are a living, breathing embodiment of transformation. And that means shedding is part of the process. So walk your path, even if it's quieter now, even if fewer people walk beside you, even if it feels unfamiliar. Because in that silence, something beautiful happens. The world starts to hear you louder than ever, not through noise, through presence. And the ones who truly belong in your life, they won't need access to the old you to love the new you. They'll meet you where you are. No explanations, no guilt, just alignment. So here we are. You've walked with me through the fire of truth. You've felt the sting of letting go. You've tasted the stillness of growth. And maybe now you realize that silence is not a retreat. It's a revolution. In a world screaming for attention, you will become powerful by focusing on yourself. Not loudly, but deeply. Your silence will build. Your focus will transform. Your absence will speak. And your presence, when it arrives again, will be undeniable. So stop explaining. Stop proving. Stop reacting. Start listening. Start building. Start becoming. And remember, those who are silent in the grain are loud in their legacy.